So the other day I was doing a research. What are the most statistic games played on Steam? And there it was, my beloved Dota. But you see, I'm not your average Dota player, and so I was looking on YouTube if anyone had posted a nice ability draft guide. Unfortunately, there were no videos that really got into explaining my favorite mode of the game. And since I've had played a few hours, I thought it was time for me to give an insight of what's ability draft about. And so, it is my pleasure to present to you a complete and universal guide for the mode. So let's get into it. As some of you may know, Dota is a quite complex game on its own. Simply explained, it's a team game where you need to destroy an enemy's base. But with its 123 different heroes base to play with, and each of them having their own strengths and weaknesses, ability draft remains a game that first playing may seem overwhelming. Each game you're given a random hero. Each player will then choose 4 abilities turn by turn amongst a pool of 48 abilities. There are 3 types of attributes for heroes: strength, agility, intelligence. One of them is your primary attribute. Strength base have generally more health points, which makes them good at engaging and being in the middle of the fight while thinking for the team. Agility base benefits from armor gain and attack speed, which translate into physical damage reduction and more attack speed. And finally, intelligent hero gain more mana points, which make them casters with high damage, but are also squishier. Now, big disclaimer here, this is only a general guideline. There will be builds that are unconventional and they will work. No one is denying that. After all, it's ability draft. You got your hero selected, so our first step will be to look at this little box over here. This is your hero stat, and is probably the best indicators of how to pick considering the given stats on your hero. We will take a special look at the attack speed, the damage, the attack range, the movement speed, and last but not least, the attributes gained per level. Now here is how all these stats may vary according to your heroes. And as you can see, these stats vary quite a lot, and they should help you consider what abilities to go for. Another way to see the picking phase is to consider the skills your hero would normally have in a standard game. Simple example, Medusa. She's a agility hero, and basically when game starts, she's super squish and needs to farm because she will rely mostly on right click damage and items in the endgame. This is how Medusa shines. Her abilities somehow help her get to that endgame. She has split shot for farming, a mana shield because she does not have much health in the beginning of the game, so she needs to be able to take a few hits without dying at the expense of some mana. So of course, to help her with her mana shield, she gets Mystic Snake, a spell that recovers mana from the enemy and slows them down. And while we're at it, let's also mention that Medusa base movement speed is 275, which is not a lot, so technically Mystic Snakes help her where she lacks in movement speed. And her ult increases her movement speed and attack damage. You see where this is going?
Look. Pretty, isn't it? Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
Okay, so now that we know that each hero has their own weakness and their own strength, we can start drafting accordingly. So, abilities, yes! But, where do we start? There are over 492 abilities when also counting the one given by Hagenem's Scepters and Sharp's upgrade. And since it's a complete guide, maybe I should cover all combos. Let me get my calculator. So 123 heroes times 3 abilities for a total of 369 abilities, nice, times 368 abilities left times 367 abilities left, times 123 all possibilities times 123 heroes. So obviously a guide that would cover all abilities and possibilities of combos could take a lifetime to make. And while I love the game, I'd like also to enjoy what else life has to offer. And with that in mind, I made a simpler guide of how I view abilities in general. But first, we're going to take a look at how Dota view its own role system for the game. Because each of these roles are actually based on the abilities heroes normally have. There's the carry, the nuker, the initiator, the disabler, the durable, the escape, the support, the pusher, the jungler. And that's how Dota categorizes all types of builds. When you're in ability draft, you end up making your own build. So each abilities you choose during the draft ends up positioning you a little bit in one of these roles. The way I see it, I think all abilities can be placed into 4 simple categories. Abilities for casters, abilities for right click, abilities for tanks, and abilities for all types of builds. We can then subdivide each of these categories into subcategories for the type of builds we want to create. Casters' abilities can be subdivided into 2 main subcategories, control and support. Caster control abilities will be considered as abilities that have an effect on the enemy while being cast from far away. In this subcategory, we will include stun abilities, slow abilities, silent abilities, routing abilities, disable abilities, and ward abilities. These abilities are usually really strong as they give you a major advantage on your opponent, rendering them vulnerable for a longer period of time. They will remain really good abilities in all phases of the game, considering they will always have an effect applied on the enemy. But they are also abilities that shine the most in the early phase of the game, as their damage won't scale against right-clickers in the endgame. Caster support abilities will be considered as abilities that support your build or your team while being cast from far away. This category will include damage abilities, healing abilities, buffs abilities, pushing abilities. Now again, each of these categories can be subdivided, just like damage abilities will be subdivided into their damage instance and their damage type. Now before we move on with the right click and the tank builds, I want to clarify something. As you can see, this can get a little complicated, because as you may have realized, one ability can enter multiple categories. And this is what will make an ability stronger than others. Well, bad and super synergy combos, but that will be later in the video. As an example, we will take the Tombstone ability. It has the 7th highest win rate amongst all abilities. But why is it so strong? Well, first, it applies the slow, and it's a ward ability. But wait a second, it has a double ward ability because it spawns zombie that you also need to destroy. And it deals damage over times also, so when not taken seriously, this is a really strong ability. Alright, time to move on with the right clickers. Just like the caster's abilities were divided into control and support, right-click abilities have the same subcategories. Right-click control abilities will be considered as abilities that have an effect on the enemy while being triggered mostly through right-click attacks. And yet again, these abilities are really strong as they give you a major advantage on your opponent, rendering them vulnerable for a longer period of time. They will remain good abilities in all phases of the game, considering they will always have an effect applied on the enemy. But there are also abilities that shine the most in the mid to end phase of the game, as your right-click hero will gain more stats to perform as a right-clicker. Support right-click abilities will be considered as abilities that favorizes your right-clicker. These categories will include range abilities, added damage abilities, attack burst abilities, reduction abilities, multiple target abilities, and finally, heal abilities. And just like casters, right-click abilities will enter multiple categories of control and support. So let's look at the best right-click ability in the game. The ability with the second best win rate, Arctic Burn. Why should it be considered the best right-click ability? 40% slow, 500 bonus attack range, current health as damage, over time in percentage, holy sh. I mean, that's just a plain nasty combo on one ability. No wonder it's an ability picked 99.97% of the time. Okay, moving on with the things.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Same as before, they can be subdivided into again the same base categories. Control tanks will be considered abilities that have an effect on the enemy while being cast from close range. They will remain really good abilities in all phases of the game, considering they will always have an effect applied on the enemy. But there are also abilities that shine most in the early mid phase of the game, until your hero becomes tankier and starts benefiting more from support tank abilities. The main difference in between the tank and the two other previous builds is that instead of dealing damage, the tank shares a masochistic relationship with other enemies in the game. Therefore, you'll see him aptly eating punches, nukes, jumping straight into damage, and laugh demonically as he presses the active of Blade Mail. Now let's take a look at the best tank ability in the game, Dispersion. An ability that returns a percentage of the damage received in the near radius. It's dark weak in the early game, but once the tank has decent stats and a few items, opponents are going to fear attacking him, leaving him to push effortlessly as the enemy crumbles from their own attack. Finally, the last category. Abilities that are good for any type of builds. These are abilities that synergize with a lot of builds. They will remain very strong in all phases of the game. 12 out of the 15 abilities with the best win rate in the game enter this category. It will include mobility abilities, invulnerability abilities, invisibility abilities, and restore abilities. Restore abilities will be subdivided into Second Life, Stalling Death negating damage, and Stack on Kill or Cast. Now let's look at the best ability in this category. Reincarnation. An ability that gives you a second life when you die. Why is it so strong? Let's state the obvious. The enemy team will need to kill you twice, but it will also help your team reposition during a fight. It will also give you the ability to jump in fight without the fear of dying, letting you tank for your team. Now that we know how to classify each skill, we can start creating builds. This is a part of the game that I really like. Through my years of playing Dota, I've experimented a lot of builds, and it's always fun to find some interactions throughout patches and the new heroes release. Thinking about each skills and their relations to one another can lead to some pretty trolly combos. So for the last part of the video, we're going to take a moment to talk about a nasty combo for each build. Each of these combos can rely mostly on two skills that enhance each other in an overpowered way. For the casters, we are going to take a look at the Proc Napalm build. To understand this kind of build, we need to talk about damage over time and the number of instances of damage. As seen previously, there are abilities that deals damage over time, with each of them applying their damage in instances. Some abilities have an instance of damage every second, while some may have multiple damage instances in a second. And then there is this one ability that adds damage to each instance of damage, the Sticky Napalm. So combining this ability with an ability that deals a lot of damage instances over time is the best way to synergize its damage. Now, which ability is the best with it is arguable depending on the abilities available at the time, but I think we should give an honorable mention to Shackles and Rot. For the right clickers, let me present to you the Serious Punch build. Because if you ever wanted to feel like Saitama for a game, this is the combo you want to have. Now, there are many variations on how to achieve this build, but our main focus for this build will be to have one ability that adds damage to our attack and combine it with an ability that gives you a critical hit. My personal favorite of this combo is Ancient Totem with Walrus Punch, resulting in a damage increase of 1600%. Alright, let's look at a tank build. I call this build the Wall. Here's how it works. Take Dispersion, that reflects damage. Combine it with Bristleback that reduces your damage, and you now have what I call Now the only thing you'll need is to show your back to the enemies to get around 60% damage reduction. Combined with a few items like Iron of Tarask or Blade Mail or Radiance, and you will be able to possibly fight the whole team alone. Alright, well this is going to be it. If you like the video and want more of these builds explained, please like and subscribe. Drop a comment on what you think about it. As this was my first video on the topic, I'm only testing waters for now, but I had a lot of fun putting this together. Before I leave, I also want to give a huge shout out to Knoxville and Buka for putting up a website that combines all of the ability draft statistics. As new patches will be released, my video may get out of date concerning which skill is now best. So feel free to visit their website to get an update of what's best now. And again, thanks for watching. See you on the next episode. As Dota is a game that is constantly evolving, we through the patches need to adapt. We mourn our fallen combos
I'm sorry, little one.
as our ruler is trying to balance our universe. Even if we fall, we will stand.